hello, and welcome once again to another family talk time with the Dookies. Today is our second session.
It is.
Yes, and I'm already enjoying what we will be doing. We have so much planned for you, so many topics planned for you, but we still want to hear from you. What do you want to hear us talk about? So I am Sania Dookie.
I'm Courtney Dookie.
Yes, so we are husband and wife. What do you call that?
Team.
Power couple, power team. I don't know. And we are both psychotherapists in our private practice, but we're also co-founders of Dookies Institute, where our desire is to empower Christian families. And so today we are going to be talking about a rather very interesting topic, and I think it's necessary for us to talk about this and always talk about it. Yes. And today's topic is mental health. We're talking about mental health in the family. And yeah, what do you think about our discussion today?
Well, as you mentioned before, it is a topic that we should keep talking about, especially in recent times.
Yes.
Given all that's been happening, I was talking with a few people recently, other psychologists and psychotherapists, and they're saying, look, it's getting overwhelming for us because the people are coming in constantly saying, look, suicidal thoughts and suicide attempts and parasuicide attempt. And and these therapists are saying it's getting really overwhelming for them because they can't keep up with it. So,
Yeah.
and each person that goes to the hospital or to a private practice who mentioned that they're struggling with suicidal thoughts, they represent a family. And they represent a father, a mother, a son, a daughter, a uncle, a nephew. They represent someone from the family. So it means then that the families are experiencing severe, almost a severe mental crisis currently. So it's crucial that we actually spend some time and talk about it.
Yeah, I was doing some research the other day, and it's saying that since the coronavirus too, there is more presentation of children and youth in the emergency centers, emergency clinics, related to some form of mental health disorder or emotional health disorder, behavioral dysfunction. So I think this is a very important topic for us to talk about, especially within the Christian community, because I think we often feel like we're immune if you're a Christian, and that's another topic for another time, but we often feel as if we're immune to mental health issues. And so we want to be that voice to say, no. We are in the field, so we're able to tell, we work with different individuals from all walks of life. And I tell you, when it comes to the Christian community, we're not immune to mental health issues. So before we get started, let's start with some stats. As I mentioned before, even recently, 2020, the prevalence of children and youth presenting to clinics, emergency clinics for suicidation and anxiety, panic attacks, and so forth, has increased. And I think we're debating over the most recent stats. Well, the stats I read from Canada Mental Health Association is that one in five individuals will in some way be impacted by mental illness, either through personal experience or a friend or a family member. So imagine 5 people all lined up. One of them is being impacted by a mental health issue. So if you are here joining us today, let us know you're here. Hi, Shia. It's really really happy to see you today. So what are some other stats we have as it relates to mental illness and why we need to talk about this?
Well, just what you just mentioned there. If there's 1 in 5, that means that 20% of the Canadian population at any given time
Yes.
will be struggling with a mental health challenge or mental health issues. And to add more to the stats, if you're watching us and you're from the US, for US population, it's 1 in 4.
Mm-hmm.
So whilst it's 20% in Canada, it's 25% in the US. And I was reviewing some stats recently that suggest that they're not fully out yet, but as we expect, that stats will at least, there will be an inflated stats
Yeah.
because of the coronavirus. So we're
Yes.
expecting
Yes.
to see, I was reading somewhere where it says 1 in 3
Mm-hmm.
are currently struggling with a mental health challenge. That's 33%. So when you think of 1 in 3, even though that 1 in 3 is a direct result of
Mm-hmm.
the coronavirus, nonetheless,
Mm-hmm.
it's 33% of our churches, of our
Yes.
homes, of our
Yes.
communities that are individuals that are struggling with a mental health challenges,
Mm-hmm.
especially anxiety.
Yes.
Anxiety has been on the increase in the last 18 months. There has been a very peak
Mm-hmm.
increase in anxiety, where at one point I heard someone said, I haven't verified this yet, but that anxiety is the number one search word. Fear and anxiety
Mm.
and panic, these are number one search word in
In
Google.
Google. Wow.
So anxiety is on the rise.
Yeah.
Depression is on the rise too.
Yeah. Yeah.
People are struggling
Yeah.
because feeling down, feeling out. So we're seeing the stats on the major mental health challenges going
Mm-hmm.
up for substance use, anxiety, and depression, which are three of the major
Yeah.
mental health challenges that people are dealing with and families are
Mm-hmm.
dealing with. And those three steadily, or not steadily, I should say, but they're in a peak
Yeah.
increase in the last 18 months.
Yes. So I want us to take it closer home because it's very easy to abstractly talk about mental health and not really see how we are impacted or someone who is close to us is being impacted by it. So, first of all, we want to say that mental health, the word mental health, is a state of being,
Yes.
a state of being. Just like you would say physical health, I'm physically healthy. So when we talk about mental health, mentally healthy, we're really referring to the fact that you're feeling psychologically well.
Well,
And in essence, that's a definition of mental health. Mental well being is when I'm feeling balanced psychologically and I'm able to function
mhm.
as I need to. But let's define what mental illness is.
Ultimately, one of the hallmark in terms of assigning a diagnosis
Yeah.
to someone with a mental illness of either depression, anxiety, we look primarily at functional impairment. In functional impairment takes into account occupational functioning,
Mm-hmm.
social functioning. For university students and school age children, we look at academic
Yeah.
functioning. So when we think of different behavioral functioning, so when you look at functioning, once the symptoms that we're experiencing starts to impact functioning, that's when we start to label it, call it a mental illness. However, um, sometimes symptoms can also be impacting a person. They're still at work,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but they're powering through it, and or people find themselves increasing the amount of work they're doing, but not producing the same amount or
Yeah.
effectively. And that's a sign of someone moving towards being burnt out, if you use
Yes.
that language, or psychologically exhausted,
Or nervous
or
breakdown
nervous
or yeah, I
breakdown
think that's the common term.
term people use.
Yeah.
So functional impairment is what, for most, we have all these symptoms, but
Yeah.
when the symptoms start to cause functional impairment, that's when we go for diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean, however, that a person who is experiencing these symptoms are not being affected significantly,
Yeah.
because some of us, we can really power through
Yeah.
We can still go to church if churches are open. We can still go to school and
Work
function and to
and
work and
yeah.
function, even though inside
Yeah.
we are struggling
We're at the end of the road.
the road. So there is almost a mental tension
Yes.
within our bodies and within our minds. And sometimes that mental tension may not necessarily
Mm-hmm.
be a mental illness per
Yeah.
se, being diagnosed or defined by what a mental illness is according to the
Mm-hmm.
Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. However, we can be our bodies tell us exactly what's going
Yeah.
on. So sometimes when people ask me, "How do you define mental illness?" I'll say to them, "Your body tells you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just tune in, just become aware of yourself."
Mm-hmm.
And that self-awareness, by tuning into the self and looking at how am I functioning,
Mm-hmm.
that can start to tell us if there are any sort of mental tensions going
Yes,
on.
yes. So we're not saying everyone needs to run, go get a
No.
diagnosis. It's just the fact that if you're not feeling mentally, if you're not feeling well psychologically, and we're going to talk about symptoms in a little bit, but if you're not feeling well, it really probably means that you're not doing well. And
Yes.
I believe that at some point in our life, all of us experience that. If we do experience stress, stress itself can impact our mental health. It does impact our mental health. So we're going into symptoms now. We're talking about feeling, worrying about a job or finances or something that needs to get done, but you can't get it
Mhm.
done. Can't sleep properly
Properly.
or sleeping too much. Can't eat because your stomach is in knots or eating too much.
Much.
So it really depends on the person and increased irritability or just flat, no tolerance
Balance.
for anything.
Especially for children,
Yes.
increased irritability is a key or an important marker for depression.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
sometimes we see this increased irritability and wonder what's going on with the child.
Hmm.
Sometimes, not all the times, sometimes it can be an indication that the child is struggling with something else and
Yeah.
an indication of depression.
Yeah. Increased irritability. Much more meltdown and tantrums as you generally see, and also defiance.
Yes.
That's a big one. A telltale for anxiety, or just that the child's really just not doing well. But adults, yeah, we do experience that impatience. Sometimes that may just be connected to the fact that we're not feeling mentally and emotionally well.
Mhm.
And so sometimes we have to really do a mental health check. We
Sure.
have to do a check.
It's
How am I
that
doing
thing.
today?
It's that thing of knowing ourselves. I talked about it earlier. Are, are you being stretched too
Yeah.
far? When you check in with yourself, how thin are you stretched currently? And that can be a major sign that you're either entering into a state of mental disequilibrium
Mm-hmm.
or you're already in that state.
Mm-hmm.
We need to find a way to bring back harmony, bring back that homeostasis
Yeah.
to our lives.
Yeah.
And we're the only one who can tell that.
Yes.
However, if you see a family member withdrawn,
Yeah.
where they're isolating, they're not being themselves, as we say, not being themselves, and they're cutting out friends and staying away from friends, and that's uncharacteristic of that person that they would isolate themselves. That's a sign that maybe something is going on.
Mm-hmm.
Someone's sleeping too much, and they are not used to doing that.
Mm-hmm.
That's also a sign that maybe something else is going on.
Yeah.
But you see people and their days, and they're not here.
Yeah.
They're in a different world. They're
Yeah.
wandering away on their days and they're staring in this blank space. Those are signs that we can look at and query them.
Mm-hmm.
If it's our mom or dad, our children, query
Yeah.
and to
Or
figure out
teen. I
our
have to say
teen,
that.
yeah,
Common, very
and
common.
teen,
Yeah.
query it and find out what's going on. They are behaving differently. So that's what we talk about functional impairment.
Yeah.
If you observe someone in the family behaving or functioning different from the norm,
Mm-hmm.
That is something to query.
Do a check-in. Do a check-in.
Maybe nothing is there, but
Yeah.
it's worth a check-in
It's
because
worth a check-in, yeah.
it is best for us to catch it early
Yes. Yeah.
and start to do something about it
Yeah.
than say, oh, they get over it, or they get through it,
Mm-hmm.
leave them alone, it's
Yeah.
okay. And then,
Yeah. And I feel like I have to say this too because a lot of times the prevalence of depression and anxiety is very high in in teens, and um, sometimes they just don't want to do anything, no motivation or anything. The chores are behind, and then the conclusion we would draw to is they're just lazy.
Mhm.
But really, is that what is going on? Oh, all they want to do is just be on their game and all that stuff. Well, did you know that excessive use of technology, the gaming, watching videos and all that stuff, it's almost a type of self-medicating, so that individual don't have to feel or to connect with what they're going through. So is overwork.
Mhm.
And I'm sure there's a long line of other things that we can see where we self-medicate, not only through substances, or food is another one,
Mhm.
but overwork, watching too much TV, gaming, what else? Can't think. I'm drawing a blank right now, but I'm just thinking of the ones that we don't generally look on, and then we label, say, hey, a person's just lazy. They choose to feel that way. And I feel like we have to bring this forward because as parents too, and as spouses, we need to have some level of understanding
Mhm.
for our significant others or for our children. And so at this point in time, I think we should uh, switch our conversation a little bit as to how does mental health itself impact the family unit, based on your experience and your research and all that stuff. How does it impact the family unit?
Oh, we mentioned some of it
Yeah.
already. So we have this withdrawal. When it can bring tension in marital
Yeah.
relationships. Why?
Yeah.
Because if the wife or the husband don't really understand, say,
Mm-hmm.
anxiety or depression,
Mm-hmm.
and because they don't understand it or haven't sought to educate
Yeah.
themselves on it, they have this perspective that get over it,
Get over it.
just get o-
You just want to feel
you
that
just want to
way.
feel that way. And sometimes because of that ignorance about what mental illness
Yeah.
is or what mental tension is,
Yeah.
because of that ignorance, we sort of treat each other differently.
Yes. Yeah.
Husbands sort of treat wives differently, wives sort of treat husband differently, and then that create a more, say for example, think of depression. If that's what's present and the couple is not taking the time to try to understand this together, it can create a rift. So
Mm-hmm.
depression now becomes a what we call a perpetual
Yeah.
problem in the relationship. No one is addressing it, no one is talking about it, no one is trying
Mm-hmm.
to have an
Don't
understanding
even
of it.
know that that's what's going
That's
on
what's
because
going
we
on,
haven't talked about it.
and it sort of
Yeah.
pull you apart because
Yes.
now no one is talking to each, they're not talking to each other
Yeah.
anymore.
Shut down.
Where the wife goes or the husband goes on in their own corner, they're doing their own thing, but inside they are struggling
Struggling. Yeah.
intensely. So
Yeah.
that's how it can so mental illness can actually tear
Yeah.
a rip, cause a rupture
Yeah.
in the couple diet.
Yes.
And if you don't address it, it keeps growing and growing and
It
growing and growing.
does. It does.
And one of the things we're going to see is more relationship coming to an end
Mm-hmm.
because of this.
Unfortunately.
And
Unfortunately.
it is something that, look, we're not saying it has to be fixed,
Mm-hmm.
but there needs to be a dialogue
Mm-hmm.
about an understanding about what is going on.
Yeah.
And this is true for almost any mental health challenge. It could be
Mm-hmm.
anxiety or substance use or depression, any other.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't understand it, it's going to cause a rift
Yeah.
in the family system. And if that rift between husband and wife will trickle down, and the children will start to experience it.
Mm-hmm.
And the children will recognize that mom or dad is more irritable. Mom and dad, they're more impatient. So
Mm-hmm.
not only are we impatient and irritable with our partners, we're also impatient and irritable
Yeah.
with the children.
Yeah.
And everyone in the home now start to walk on what a lot of couples and families say to me. We start to walk on eggshell.
Eggshells, yes.
So there is this anxious environment, and that nobody wants to say anything. We just tiptoe around each other, but we're very uncomfortable, and that itself is extremely painful.
Yes.
And it's almost a damage is being caused. It can be solved,
It can be solved.
and that's it. It can be solved. But the proverbial white elephant in the room that nobody really wants to
Yes.
to address and talk about, we avoid it altogether.
Yeah. Why is it that we don't talk about mental health in the family?
We've done a video on this before. There's a taboo-ness to it in
Yes.
some families, right? So there's this taboo-ness where, or there's this thing that mental health is not a thing,
It's not a thing.
right? So
Because you can't see it, you know, it's invisible.
if I break my hand, okay, I know there's a broken hand.
Yes.
So we can sort that. We can put
Go
something
to
on
the
that.
doctor,
We can
get
fix
help.
that.
Yes.
But for mental health, the why it's not being addressed. One could be cultural. So there's a cultural piece as to how to address this, how it's dealt with.
Yes.
Within
There's
stigma to it.
Yeah.
So there is that
Yeah.
cultural, there's a stigma, there's religious
Yeah.
pieces to it, how we address that.
Yeah.
And there is one of the big ones that we've been talking about is ignorance. Fail to understand. Sometimes when I meet with families or couples, and we sort of talk about more psychoeducation around this, they say to me, "Wow, I never know that. I never know that depression could do this. I never know that anxiety could do this. I really never know that." So this education or psychoeducation gives a new perspective
It does.
on how to approach things.
Yeah.
So once we start to look at those areas that are preventing us from talking about it, the key thing, we start to talk about it. And the moment we sort of talk about it, there's a shift.
It starts to bring healing.
A shift.
It's just amazing because we're now validating that person's experience, and validation brings brain changes.
Yes.
It's just amazing. So we've established what mental health is, what it means to have mental balance, and what mental illness is, what certain symptoms could look like. We want to hear from you. You know, what are your thoughts? Have you ever seen that around you? You know, someone struggling, and what have you done, or what do you think we should do? Which is actually our next step. So I want to hear from you. What should you do in a situation as this where you recognize someone may actually not be doing mentally well? What should you do? What is one thing that you think you can do today to support that individual? So there's a scripture that says we need to be slow to speak and quick to listen. And I had to say this first because a lot of times we're expert on people's business. we know what to tell them. We know what to say. Sometimes we actually do. But sometimes people don't need to hear your solutions. They just need to know that they are being heard. That's the number one thing I would say is inquire out of love and genuineness and listen.
I share this with you. It's probably one of the greatest trick in the psychology book is the number one thing in therapy that brings healing is not the education of the psychologist or therapist. It's not the techniques that the psychologist or therapist spend years to study.
Yeah.
It's not anything miraculous that brings the healing in therapy. The number one thing in therapy that brings healing is the relationship between the therapist and the client. And why am I sharing that? Is this. Most therapists are trained to do reflective listening, to do empathetic listening,
Yes.
to connect with our clients. And the research suggests that this connection with the client or with the individual working with is the number one cause for healing.
They have that space.
That space. Imagine if we could cultivate.
Yeah.
And last week we talked about this in terms of cultivating an environment for love. It's no different from that. If we can cultivate an environment where it doesn't matter what I'm going through, if I feel sad, I can talk about my sadness. If I feel angry, I can talk about my anger. If I feel frustrated, I can talk about that. If we have that environment, then we start to reduce the impact of mental illness on the family. And there's some fascinating stuff that I share about how to deal with this within the family system. I think as we go forward, people hear more about it, but there's some fascinating stuff that we can do in the home. Couples can do with their children and husband and wives.
And how to break the ice,
And how
because
to
a
do
lot
that.
of family systems already have the ice, and you're like, oh my gosh, I think we've gone too far. How do we break it? So that's where both of us come in. We have been helping families to do so, and we're in the process of completing an online program where couples can be a part of and parents can be a part of, to see how they can heal these things within their family system. So I noticed that some individuals have been responding. What do you do when you notice that someone is in need of some mental or emotional support? Share responded, provide a listening ear and give them support. That's it. Provide a listening ear. Another person said, being heard is a big one, and building trust. Amazing.
Yep.
I think these are
Key. Actually, there is, again, hinting at it, there's a presentation I have talk about when a person feel like they're being heard. There is some profound things that goes on in the body, really deep stuff. When
what
we
happens in your
perceive,
brain.
when
It's
things that
amazing.
happens in the brain when we perceive that
Yes.
we're being listened to, we're being heard, and I can't wait to share those with people. It'll be exciting. However, I really agree with what's being said here.
Yes.
Provide a listening ear, give them support, and a big one of to build trust is to really, if listening will build trust.
Yes, and sometimes we're afraid to ask because we're afraid we open up a can of worms. But your only role there is just to listen, build that trust, and then ask that person, how may I help you? And that means you can support them. I will go to see a professional with you. I will sit in that session with you. I will repeat everything you say if you're shy to talk about it until you're feeling comfortable to do so. You don't have to take on that burden of trying to fix a mental health situation if you don't know how to. Go seek support with that person. Go with them. And sometimes that's all you need to do. That's it. So even if you open that can of worms, which we need to because a lot of people are struggling and suffering in silence because mental illness is invisible, it's inside. Yes, we see behaviors and all that stuff, but it's more than what meets the eye.
One of the things, a pioneer in the field of psychotherapy and psychology said this, that all we need for healing is to have basically a non-judgmental
That's
environment.
huge.
If we have a non-judgmental environment,
Yes.
we have empathy, where we try to really feel and understand what the person is going through, and we're genuine, we're congruent with the person. And this is Carl Rogers. He said, if we create an environment that is non-judgmental, that is empathetic, and that is congruent, in which we connect with, we're genuine with the person. If we have those three things in any environment, it creates an environment of healing.
Yeah.
And we can do that in our homes.
We can do that.
That's possible in the home, to create a non-judgmental, an empathetic, and a genuine environment in the home. And that can go a long way in mitigating symptoms of mental distress when they show up. Because if I go to work and I come home and I'm tired and I'm frustrated, there's a place at home where we can talk about that. Husbands and wives and teenagers and children can come and talk about it, because
Yeah.
the home is of such that we can talk about this. And that is the kind of home that
Mhm.
God desires for us to build. A
Yes.
home that is filled with compassion, where we can be empathetic towards each other, a home where we don't judge each other, we
Mhm.
care and we love each other, and a home in which we're really genuine
Yes.
to each other. That's God's ideal for a home. So we can create a home that can be a bulletproof vest to
Yes.
help with mental health challenges.
Mm.
And that is profound, that God has given us enough in His Word that we can build a home environment
Mhm.
that can become a bulletproof vest
Yeah.
to help us to deal with. So, again, the mental health challenges are there, but we can build a bulletproof vest
Bulletproof
to
vest.
deal
Yeah.
with the darts when they're coming in
Yes.
to our families.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're just finishing up here right now, and we really hope that you were inspired by what we talked about here today. Keep talking about it.
Yes.
Share this message, because the more we talk about it, is the more we never know how we may heal someone out there just by them knowing that they do recognize mental health as important, they do validate it, and that really helps them to come out of that shell to say, okay, I think I need to talk about this, I think I can go seek help, because
Mhm.
it's not a taboo anymore, especially within the Christian community. So once again, we just want to thank you so much for joining us, and please, we welcome you to share this video with others, and also join us next Monday afternoon with another amazing topic that you can utilize today. Every time you listen, you can
Yes.
start implementing in your family system, so you can live the way God wants you to be. All right, until next time, this is Sania and Courtney wishing you a wonderful and happy week.
Week. Bye.